rice is largely responsible for Japan's success as a nation today. Japan is one of the most prosperous nations today. It has an amazing economy, it's one of the most influential countries in Asia, and it boasts one of the most strongest passports in the world. And Japanese food and Japanese culture is famous all across the world. And all of this was shaped by rice. That's why we'll dive deep into why rice shaped Japan's financial future in today's video. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get into it. To understand how rice is linked to the Japanese economy, we need to go all the way back in history to the foundation of Japanese society. The year is 400 BC. While Japan's neighbors such as China and Korea are on the verge of becoming strong centralized states, Japan is still composed of primitive hunter-gatherers. But that is until rice cultivation was introduced to the region. Rice cultivation gradually spread all across the country, and hunter-gatherers transformed into civilized societies that were essentially shaped around rice farming. This change in Japanese society was rapid. In a span of a few centuries, Japan saw centralized kingdoms starting to emerge. They had flourishing markets, and they started investing behind elaborate structures. And this all also included organized welfare. You see, rice enabled this transformation due to two key reasons: food surplus and societal changes. Higher food surplus from rice cultivation meant that the Japanese population started to increase rapidly. Rice also brought about a shift in societal values. You see, rice cultivation was a communal effort. It was labor intensive. That's why it gave rise to collectivism and hard work. And the end result was that rice became a tool of control and dominance. This was because people who controlled rice meant that they controlled the very means of food production, and that's why they started to enjoy more influence over others. All this gave rise to hierarchies, a shift in societal structures. So these two factors gave rise to highly centralized kingdoms on the island. It created an atmosphere of competition to cultivate more rice because of the benefits that it brought. The next few centuries would start to bring rapid societal progress. The number of kingdoms would slowly dwindle. They would be conquered or annexed, and this was until a single entity remained under the Yamato clan. This clan owned much of their success due to the ability to cultivate rice better than their rivals. More rice meant more manpower. To effectively rule over their vast domain, they collected taxes in the form of rice. The rice collected would then in turn be distributed to their warrior class, the samurai, as their wages, and the samurai sold any excess rice for cash. So effectively, rice became more than a commodity. It became currency. The people in power in Japan started to measure their wealth based on this theory. So it goes something like this. A koku was a unit of wealth where one koku was equal to 1 year's worth of rice for a man. And that amounts to about 150 kilograms or 330 pounds. Now, this doesn't mean that the formal currency like coins and paper money didn't exist, but they weren't valued as much. Also, traditional notes were facing severe inflationary pressures. Most people just preferred to hold their wealth in rice, as this was subject to less inflationary pressure. However, there was a problem. Not every business or merchant accepted rice as payment, especially those in the cities. After all, they lacked proper facilities to store all that food properly. So any feudal lord coming into the city with his vast rice trove needed to convert his rice into coins or paper money. And this need to convert rice into coins started giving rise to independent brokers, money exchangers, and rice markets. And all of this had an unintended but hugely positive effect on Japan's development. It created greater urbanization and the establishment of an early banking system. You see, these urban exchanges between rice and money started becoming vast rice grain stores on top of being centers of commerce. So food availability in populated cities would almost become guaranteed. And this was the case especially in times of drought or a season of bad harvest. And as a result, even pre-modern Japanese society was highly rapidly urbanized, and this fueled higher literacy rates amongst the general population. In fact, up until the 18th century, when Europe just began to industrialize, Japan was considered one of the most urbanized countries in the world. And because of this, Japan also had one of the most literate societies in the world, all thanks to a rice-based economy. The glory days of rice in Japan came to an end when America dropped the atomic bomb. For the first time in history, Japan had been defeated and occupied by a foreign force. By the way, I made a video about the guy who created the atomic bomb, so check it out here if you haven't already. Anyway, the Americans brought various aspects of their culture after this. In terms of food, it meant that the Japanese were suddenly more exposed to America's wheat-based cuisine. Bread, wheat noodles, pastries, and burgers quickly became mainstream. This was especially aided by the fact that the United States was effectively dumping vast quantities of its wheat surplus into the country as part of its food aid program. You see, wheat was cheap and plentiful, and once it became popular, there was no going back. Rice farmers simply couldn't cope with cheaper American wheat. Rice consumption started to decline, and this led to low prices and huge surpluses. All of this crippled the domestic rice farmers. As a result, many rice farmers left their farms to go to the big city looking for work. Now, this wasn't all bad news because it helped Japan with its post-war economic recovery. You see, its manpower, which was mostly entirely agricultural and forestry related, now shifted from these low productivity sectors to high productivity sectors like automobiles and electronics. Rice no longer holds a prominent position in Japan as it once did. However, it is still fascinating to reflect on how this simple grain created banking practices, money exchanges, government reserves, and much more. It truly shaped the future of Japanese economy as we know it today. If you like these kinds of videos, I'm sure you'll like this video that I made about the Great Depression. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon.